There was a study done by a fellow by the name of David Shepard, a biology professor. He took 22,000 different reptiles, and he took the reptiles and he made rubber reptiles. And how people do these kinds of things, I'm not quite sure, but he made rubber reptiles, and most of them were snakes, and most of them were just creatures like armadillos or something we see on the road. You see a lot of those down south. Dead armadillos, they taste just like chicken, but they're and so they what he wanted to do was he took these 22,000 rubber animals out and he placed them on the road, and he placed them beside the road, and he wanted to see drivers' reactions of what they would do when they came up to these rubber animals thinking they were real animals. And so what he found out is that people pay very little attention whatsoever to animals that are on the road. As a matter of fact, especially when it's a snake that's on the road. Here's what he said, a couple of examples, Shepard witnessed. He said a policeman crushed one of the snakes with his tires, then stopped and pulled his gun. One woman saw the snake on the road and swerved to kill it, then turned around and ran over it 5 more times. Genesis 3 tells us that God put enmity between, or hatred between the serpent, the tempter, and the woman. He said this, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now, as much fear as women seem to have of snakes, I have them as well, but as much fear as women especially have of snakes. I got to tell you a little story we did one time to my wife. It was a great thing. It's when we were at Cub First. My wife hates snakes and hates things like that, but we took and we taped on the back of the toilet lid. We taped a snake on the back of the toilet lid, so when she lifted up the toilet lid to go to the bathroom, so about 11:30 at night, all of a sudden, with the girls around, we hear this screeching yell, and we knew exactly what had happened. She had finally found that snake, and so as much fear as women seem to have of snake, I'm pretty sure that's not what the verse is talking about. The word enmity doesn't mean fear. Enmity means a hatred, a violent anger. It is an emotion intended for one's enemy, not for a creature that you're afraid of. The serpent was the enemy of God, intended to destroy that serpent with the offspring of the woman. Her sin had robbed her of the garden and God's intimate presence. Now, the promise was that the boy child would undo the damage. She figured that God was promising that he would finally give her a boy child, and that this boy child would beat down the old serpent and she'd get back into the garden. You remember, God made the Garden of Eden. What a blessed spot that was. It was a spot where there was all good things there, good things to eat, good things to munch on, whatever it might be. It was perfect. As a matter of fact, they didn't wear clothes because the weather was perfect. The weather was perfect. It was great. And but then when the fall of man came, then they put on fig leaves. You remember? You know the whole story. I don't have to go into that. So who was firstborn? Who was Eve's firstborn son? Well, Eve's firstborn son was a guy by the name of Cain. And here's what we're told about Cain. Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Now she figured that was her ticket back into the garden, that she was going to get back into that perfect spot and perfect place, and that she was going to get back in because here was the man that would take back her birthright. And so But the problem is that instead of being her salvation, he was her heartache. And so he killed the younger brother, Abel, and then went into exile for the sin that wasn't the prophecy, what the prophecy had meant. What the prophecy had meant was, it means that the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head. Now hang with me because this gets a little technical here. He said it was the seed of the offspring of the woman. Generally, that's not how the child was spoken of in those days. A descendant was rarely spoken of, women, sorry, but they were rarely spoken of as the seed of the woman, but rather of the man. If you remember, the nation of Israel was either called the seed of Abraham or it was called the seed of Jacob. You also remember the priests serving in the temple were spoken of as being the seed of Aaron. You remember God spoke of punishing some of the seed of David. Children were generally spoken of as being the seed of man, but this prophecy referred to the child as the seed of woman. It's almost as if there were no earthly father by the name of Adam that was involved in this child's birth. I wonder who might have been born had no earthly father. There was one single person who we place our whole trust and all of our faith in, and his name is Jesus Christ. A woman who had never known a man. So, if the seed of woman is Jesus, who's the serpent? Well, it's pretty clear from the story. It is Satan. That's who it is. Now, I know that some of us don't like to talk about it, but the bottom line is, you guys, is that there is a whole spiritual world out there that exists that we do not see. We play with it. We mess around with it. We go to movies about it. We see things about it, but there is a whole spiritual world out there that I want to tell you that you do not mess with. You don't mess with it. I was walking into the movie theater with my wife, and we were going to see something, I forget what it was. And so there was a group of about 20 teenagers that were there, and so one of them stepped up immediately. I thought it was one of the kids from the church or something, and they said, sir, you got to help us. And I said, okay. They said, can you get us into this movie? We'll buy your ticket, and can you get us into this movie? Because we really want to see this movie. And I said, what is the movie? And they said, they told me the movie's name, and I said, doesn't that deal with like the paranormal, like spirits and stuff like that? Oh, yeah. We want to see that movie. I said, I'm a pastor of a church. I am not going to allow you to go see some kind of paranormal, like creepy stuff like that. I just want to tell you that I love you enough to tell you, stand here to tell you, if you're messing with that junk, stop. Because you don't realize what there is out there. I have seen that firsthand. I've seen it firsthand. And it is nothing to deal with. So if the seed of the woman is Jesus, the serpent is Satan, the seed of the woman was going to bruise the head of Satan. In the process, this young man, the seed of the woman, would himself be bruised. What was Isaiah 53, the prophecy of what Jesus was going to be? It was this. It pleased the Lord to bruise him. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him. And with his stripes we are all healed. Now Satan is a major player in the passion of Christ. He's a major player. If you've ever seen, what is it, Mel Gibson's deal? The Passion of Christ, yeah. Man, there's a scene there of a serpent, and I don't think it's scriptural, but it still wigs me out. But it is so vivid and so real. And yet, it pleased the Lord to bruise him. That's a kind of an anomaly to me. Why is that? Satan is a major player in the Passion. He is the primary focus of why Jesus came. He's one of the major reasons Jesus died on a cross. 1 John tells us that the reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. What exactly had Satan done to make him the focus of all this? Had he set the devil up, and so there would be this bad guy in the story? He just had chosen Satan to have somebody to pick on? No, not at all. In fact, it was kind of the other way around. Isaiah gives us insight into the beginnings of who Satan really was. His name was Lucifer. Now listen to what it says. Now you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the dawn. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly on the most high heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. In other words, here is an angel. Here is an angel that has said, I am going to be like God. I am going to be God. I'm going to be more powerful than God. If you remember all of the... So Lucifer's objective was to take over. He wanted to overthrow the God of the rule in his place. Revelation 12 tells us Satan had even succeeded in enlisting a third of the angels in his cause. A third of the angels. So he has a very well thought out army. He has a very well thought out, and he aggressively wants to attack us. Now, remember, enmity, which God said he would place between man and the woman, enmity or the man, enmity is not just kind of a, I really don't like that guy. Enmity is not some kind of a, they're all right, but sometimes they just kind of get on my nerve. Enmity is not that at all. Enmity is something where they hate you with everything they have. And I want to tell you again that the devil wants to kill, steal, and destroy, and he hates you, friends. He does not like anything about you. Now, we think that he likes us because he gives us what we want sometimes, right? I mean, after all, look at all the things he gives us. And oh man, he makes them look good, right? But you see, God has all these, what we think are all of these don'ts. And so Jesus came to give us a bunch of don'ts. No, not at all. Jesus came to set us free. But those very things that Satan gives to us that look so good end up being the things that entrap us and ensnare us and take us down. So Lucifer's objective was to take over. How do you think he could pull God down and put himself on the throne? That's where Genesis 3 comes in. If you didn't know better, you might think the encounter between Satan and Eve was accidental. But Satan hadn't been just strolling through the garden that day and all of a sudden said, whoa, there's Eve, and bumped into her. Well, since I'm here, I'm going to just offer her a little bit of something so that man will finally fall. Genesis 1 and 2 are all about God creating the world and everything in it, and God gave the world to somebody. Who did he give it to? He gave it to Adam and Eve. Listen in Genesis 1. We're told God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish, the sea, the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. In other words, Adam could just go out and go, and everything would be ruled by his authority. That would be cool to have that kind of authority. Wouldn't that be awesome? But you see, authority seems to go to people's head. You give them a little bit, they take a little more. Give them a little more, they go a little more. And that's exactly what happened. So God gave Adam and Eve dominion over the earth, and he gave them authority over everything in his creation. And the earth was focus of all of God's creative power, and Adam and Eve were the crowning glory of his efforts. In other words, man and woman was the crowning glory of everything that God had made. He looked out at the sea, said, whoa, that's cool. He looked out at the mountains and said, this is great, this is wonderful, this is fabulous. He looked at the beauty, he looked at the sky, he looked at all of those kinds of things, and he must have just been kind of, I don't know if God can get proud of himself, but I guess he can, because it would be a spiritual pride, and that or a good pride, and so I guess that would be okay. I guess we'll allow God a little bit of leeway on that. So he looked out and said, those things are good. When he looked out and saw man, that was the crowning glory of what he had made. It seems that Satan, that if he could take those things away from God, he could effectively take his throne as well. And so here's what he did. First of all, he took ownership of the world. John describes Satan as the prince of this world. Ephesians 2 says, the ruler of the kingdom of the air. 1 John says, the whole world is under the control of the evil one. When Adam and Eve took and ate of the fruit of the garden, he effectively turned over the deed to this world and to the devil. Then Satan took ownership of man away from God. That's why the Bible speaks so often about being redeemed or purchased by God. 1 Peter, it was not by perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Hebrews says, by his own blood, Jesus entered once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. 1 Corinthians, you were bought at a price, therefore honor God with your body. That's why when Jesus was led into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan, Satan offered Jesus a deal. He said in Matthew, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world and all of the splendor. And he said to him, all these things I will give you if you will bow down and worship me. Give me what? Satan tells Jesus, make me God. Worship me. Place me on the throne, then I'll give you back some of what I've taken away. But of course, Satan had no intention of giving up his control of anything. We had the breath of God within us. And we have the breath of God within us. As a matter of fact, the Bible says that we were made, you and I were made in the image of God himself. We have the power to choose. We were made in the image of God. But how did Satan have a hold of us? It tells us in Scripture that he had the power of death in his hand. You see, because the sin of Adam, everybody dies. That's what it's told in Romans 5. And in Romans 6, it tells us the wages of sin is death. And in Hebrews 2, it tells us that the focus of Jesus on the cross was to defeat the power of death. It says he came to become like us so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death. That's powerful. The devil came to and wanted to free those who, in all their lives, he wanted to hold their lives in slavery by the fear of death. Death was Satan's own ultimate power over mankind. Thus he knew that he had to take Jesus out before Jesus took him out. Jesus had to be out of the picture. So the devil thought that he had thought up this grand scheme of things, and throughout the Gospels we see him using deception and lies and temptation and false accusations on Jesus. But none of it works. So ultimately he fell back on his most powerful tool, death. And Satan figured that if he could kill Jesus before Jesus could do what he came to do. And so behind the scenes, Satan worked on the people closest to Jesus. If he could only kill Jesus, and then it occurred to him to use the cross to do his work. Satan thought the cross was his idea. Satan thought it was his idea, but he was wrong. This is what Jesus had to do. He stepped out of heaven, friends, came as a virgin as a virgin birth, and then went to a cruel cross, suffered and died, not because it was Satan's idea, but it was his own idea of how he would redeem mankind, his most precious possession on earth. Colossians says this: the Father has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. I want to go back to something because I thought of something while we were here. I made a statement that says the Bible tells us that Satan had a number of tools at his disposal. Throughout the Gospels, we see him using. See if these are anything new. Deception, lies, temptation, false accusations. As a matter of fact, the Bible describes him as the accuser, accusations, as the accuser of the brethren. Now, you can form your own idea, let's just say, about a staff member like Larry. You can form your idea. You can form your idea if he's a good guy or a bad guy. He's a good guy. He is a good guy. But if I came over and I started saying, I want you to know that here are the things that are not good about Larry, you can rest assured that I am being used as a stinking pawn of the enemy to talk about Larry. Why? Because it is an accusation. So when somebody lies, or when they steal, or when they give way to temptation, or whatever it is, deception or lies, or whatever it is, you can rest assured they're being used as a pawn for Satan. Now, he thinks he's some kind of big shot because he can do that to you and I. But the amazing thing is that he tried to do it to Jesus. And so he starts whispering in the ears of his disciples who didn't go to the cross with him, who turned their back on him, who didn't follow him all the way. And he uses those lies and that deception and all of that, and he uses those guys to turn away from Jesus. But you see, Jesus was too smart for that. He thought, you think that it's your plan for me to die on a cross, but it's my plan to redeem the world and all of mankind. Now, there will be people who will try to tell you they can get into heaven by being a good person. They believe that heaven is reserved for people who do good things, and that hell is reserved only for those who do bad things. But hell was never designed for people like you and I. I want to tell you who it was designed for, and I love this. I wish I could claim this was an original thought. It is not good or bad that sends you to hell. You understand that? It is not good or bad that sends you to hell. It is, you'll end up going where your owner lives. You'll end up going where your owner lives. So if you are owned, or if you are manipulated, or if you are controlled, or if you are under the control of Satan, then you'll end up going exactly where your owner lives. But if you live under the control of Jesus Christ, who came to give you life and life more abundantly, where you live and you do things and you show him your love and your care and all of those kinds of things, I want to tell you, that's where you go. You'll go where your owner lives. And he says, I go to prepare a place for you. And that is heaven itself. And that's where he lives. And that's where you'll go. Where your owner lives. But let's face it, you guys. That's where the real rub comes in, isn't it? Really? Come on, I need an amen on that, somebody. That's where the real rub comes in. Because really, when you think about it, Satan went away and took a third of the angels because he wanted power, he wanted control, he wanted to rule his own life. And not only rule his life, but he wanted to rule others, and he wanted to rule families, and he wanted to rule jobs, and he wanted to rule. He wanted to be the ruler of this world. He wanted to rule. And he wanted to rule you. And so the real rub comes in is not a story some years and years and years and years ago at the creation and the foundation of this earth. The real story comes in every single day of our life when we're faced with decisions and we want to make the decisions as opposed to placing yourself and your life in the hands of somebody else and allowing them to rule your life. Well, it's just a small decision. I can make this one on your own. Can you? Well, it's only going to cost a little bit of money. I can make this one on my own. I don't need to seek God's will. Can you? Well, it's just a difference between one job and another. It's really not that big of a deal. Can you make that decision? I assert to you that you take your life and place it in the hands of somebody else that can rule your life and rule it well and rule it like it is supposed to be. And I want to tell you, in that is freedom. You say, well, he's going to control my life. He's going to control my life. Life's not going to be fun anymore. Friends, I want to tell you that's the exact opposite of what is true. You talk about control. You talk about no fun. You talk to some of these that are in addictions. I want to tell you, that is no fun, folks. That is no fun. So we screwed up this morning really bad. My wife and I wake up and say, man, I'm wide awake. What's the matter with me? I looked at my thing. It was like 5 something or 6 something. I couldn't remember. I said, hey, I've got an idea. And she said, what's that? I said, let's go out for breakfast this morning. I mean, we always go to McDonald's because I go there and it's fast. We always go there, but let's go somewhere nice. You and I kind of looking at each other, gazing into each other. That'll do something for me right before I go to church and make me feel good. So let's go out let's go out to eat. So she said, okay. So my wife, okay, this is just how it is, you guys. She's a coffeeholic. Seriously. I mean, she is a coffeeholic. All the time. I mean, at least. Don't tell her I told you this. She's not in here, is she? Every time, I mean, at least once a week I hear, I mean it, I'm getting off this stuff. I'm getting off this stuff. I'm getting off this stuff. It does something to me. I don't know what it does, but it does something to me. I don't know what it does. So this morning, so she told me, I'm down to 2 cups a day. She told me that earlier this week. I said, that's great, hon. That's really good. 2 cups is good. So we go out to breakfast together. We go to First Watch, and they've got pretty good coffee. And I watch as she fills her glass once, all the way to the brim, puts the stuff in there, drinks her down, takes the second cup, fills it up all the way to the brim, puts the stuff in there, grabs it, third time. Listen to this. This is so funny. So I say to her, hey, what happened to 2 cups a day? Oh, she said, I let it get down to a certain spot. So these aren't really whole cups. Mm-hmm. But she said, I'll admit, 2 cups can become 10 cups really quick. I said, yeah, that's right, hon. They can. Now, don't go out of here and say, Pastor Scott is a legalist and he doesn't like, I love coffee. Look at what's in our sanctuary, for crying out loud. You guys have corrupted my wife. What I'm trying to make a point of is that Satan will bind you and addict you and keep a hold of you, and the very things that you thought were great end up being the downfall of who you are. I don't care what it is. Money. Oh, no, don't talk about that. Isn't it true? You remember back in the days when you were first married. If you're not married, back in nowadays. You remember when you didn't have 2 nickels to rub together? And yet, life seemed so much simpler then. And the more we got, it's like that, I shouldn't be doing this song. The more money we got, the more money we, how's that go? The more money we come across, the more money. Yeah, the more problems we see. But that's true, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, really, when you think about it, really, I used to drive a 1973 Pinto and was happy with that thing because it had a sunroof. I was living in luxury, baby. Sunroof. Just prayed to God that nobody hit me from the rear end because they would explode if somebody did. I don't care what it is, you guys. If you think something doesn't have control over you, including money, then give it away. Let me see you give it away. And if you can't give it away, then it's got control over you. Now, then Duke Energy and some of those others might have control over you if you give it too much away, but you got to give it in the right spot. Years ago, there was a preacher in Boston, Massachusetts, named S.D. Gordon. One Sunday, he got up into the pulpit and pulled out an old, beat-up, rusty bird cage. First, he explained how he had come by the cage. He said that week he had encountered a boy of about 10 years old carrying this cage containing several miserable small birds. That boy had obviously trapped for some reason. Curious, he asked the boy what he was intended to do with them. I'm going to play with them, have some fun with them, the boy responded. Gordon thought about that for a moment, then asked, what will you do with them after that? Oh, I have some cats at home. This was an evil boy. And they like birds. That didn't set too well with Mr. Gordon, so he asked the boy what he would take for the birds. Surprised, the boy blurted out, Mister, you don't want to buy these birds. They're ugly. They're just field birds. They don't sing or anything. Nevertheless, the preacher persisted and soon struck a bargain with the boy for the birds, and the boy was out of sight. He opened the cage and set the birds free. In the pulpit, Gordon held up the empty cage, and he told another story. He told of how Satan had boasted that he had baited a trap and caught a world full of people. What are you going to do with them? Jesus asked him. I'm going to play with them. I'm going to tease them. I'm going to use them as pawns, make them marry and divorce and fight and kill each other. Satan replied, and when you get tired of playing with them, what will you do with them? Jesus inquired. Condemn them. Satan answered, they're no good anyway. Jesus then asked what Satan would take for them. You can't be serious, the devil responded. They would just spit on you and they'd hit you and hammer nails into you. They're no good. How much? The Lord asked again. All your tears and all your blood, that's the price, Satan said gleefully. So Jesus paid the price. And he took the cage, you guys. And he opened the door and he set us free. Free to love him and free to care for him. And we are redeemed through one single person and have placed our trust and faith in one single person that somebody might think is mystical or somewhere out at 2,000 years ago. But I want to tell you, I place my faith and my trust, my hope in one single person, and his name is King Jesus. And he has set me free. He has set me free.
Set my heart on fire.